Okay, I'm just gonna say it. In 25 plus years of South Park, the only kid in that show who is actually genuinely deeply traumatized is Butters Stotch. Not Stan, not Kyle, not Kenny. Kenny dies every other week, but he comes back. He's fine. Butters doesn't come back. Butters just keeps breaking episode after episode, season after season, in these tiny pieces that the show feeds us as comedy. And we laugh every single time. His dad locking him in the basement? Comedy. His mom emotionally tearing him apart? Comedy. Cartman dressing him up as a girl and abandoning him? Hilarious. The whole show packages his pain in this bright, fast, ridiculous wrapper and keeps handing it to us. And that's the genius of Trey Parker and Matt Stone. The whole time, they've been telling us something deeply dark about this kid. We just weren't watching closely enough. Then one night in season 6, Butters sat down in his room, took some aluminum foil, made himself a helmet, threw on a cape, and announced to the universe that from now on he was Asterisk Professor Chaos, the greatest villain South Park has ever seen. And every single fan of the show laughed. Of course it's funny. It's a 9-year-old boy in a tinfoil hat declaring war on humanity. But here's what I want you to understand. That moment wasn't comedy. That was the real turning point of the entire show. Most of us just didn't catch it. Because Butters didn't invent Professor Chaos out of nowhere. Professor Chaos had been living inside that kid for years, waiting, watching, taking notes every time his dad locked the door, every time his mom guilt-tripped him, every time Cartman lied to him, every time Stan and Kyle treated him like a backup option. And one night, the kid had finally collected enough material to walk out of his own brain and put on a costume. That's not funny. That's a kid having a breaking point. By the end of this video, you're not going to be able to watch a single Butters scene the same way ever again. Real quick, if you're into this kind of stuff, hit that subscribe button. It helps the channel out. All right, let's get into it. Asterisk, let's start with his house. Because his house is where everything actually happens. Forget the school. Forget the bus stop. Forget Cartman's basement. The real story of Butters Stotch happens inside the Stotch family home. A normal-looking suburban house in South Park, Colorado, with two normal-looking parents, Steven and Linda Stotch, who, on the surface, look like the kind of mom and dad who'd bake cookies and tuck their kid into bed. Except they don't. Not even close. Steven Stotch is one of the most controlling, rigid parents in the entire show. He has a specific idea of what his son is supposed to be. Quiet, obedient, polite, successful, never embarrassing. The second Butters deviates even slightly from that script. Steven comes down on him like a hammer, grounded. Locked in his room, sent to the basement, forbidden from seeing his friends, sometimes for things Butters didn't even do. The punishment is the default response to anything that isn't perfection. Then there's Linda. Linda is a different kind of damage. She doesn't lock him in rooms. She just looks at him with this exhausted, disappointed face and says things like, "Your father is right, Butters," in a voice that sounds caring, but actually makes the kid feel like he's the reason his parents are unhappy. Linda's love comes with conditions. It comes with guilt. And Butters has been swimming in that guilt since the day he was born. I'm not going to call Steven and Linda monsters in the cartoon sense. The show is way smarter than that. There's something more familiar. Two people who never figured out how to actually be parents, and they took it out on their kid. And Butters, being the kind of soft, sensitive, naturally optimistic child that he is, absorbed every single ounce of it. He didn't fight back. He didn't act out. He just learned to apologize for existing. You ever met a kid like that in real life? The one who says sorry before anyone even says anything to them? The one who flinches when adults walk by? The one who'd rather take the blame than have anyone get upset? That's Butters Stotch every single episode. Asterisk, quick pause real quick. I gotta ask you something. I've been on this kick lately where I've been going back and rewatching all the cartoons I grew up with. And honestly, it's been wild seeing how much of them just goes over your head as a kid. So tell me in the comments, what were your top 3 favorite cartoons growing up? I genuinely want to know. Drop them down below. Maybe I'll cover yours next. Asterisk, okay, back to it. Now let's talk about Butters at school. If home is where Butters gets emotionally shut down, school is where he gets used. By his friends. And I'm putting friends in air quotes there for a reason. If you actually pay attention to how Stan, Kyle, Cartman, and Kenny treat Butters across the show, you start to realize something really uncomfortable. None of them ever really treat Butters as an equal. He's the spare, the backup, the kid you grab when Kenny dies and you need a fourth. Cartman is the obvious one. Cartman has, over the course of the show, dressed Butters as a girl named Margarine, abandoned him in a fake war scenario, talked him into pretending to be his lost cousin, and scammed him out of money more times than I can count. And Butters keeps coming back every single time. Why? Because Cartman is the only kid in town who pays attention to him. Even if the attention is awful. Even if it's manipulation. Butters is so starved for any kind of focus from another person that he'll take Cartman's poison just to feel like somebody notices him. But here's what's even darker. Stan and Kyle, the supposedly good kids of the show, aren't really much better. They're nicer to him, sure, but watch how they interact with him. Half the time they don't even invite him to things. They treat him as a placeholder. When Kenny dies, Butters becomes the fourth friend. When Kenny comes back, Butters gets shuffled out. He's tolerated, not loved, and he knows it. He just smiles through it because that's his survival skill. This is where the show is at its most devastating. Butters is not stupid. The show wants you to think he's naive, but he's not stupid. He sees everything. He notices everything. He just doesn't have the vocabulary or the confidence to call any of it out, so he absorbs it. He files it away. He goes home. He gets grounded for something he didn't do. He sits in his room, and he waits. For what? Well, that's where Professor Chaos comes in. Asterisk. Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. All of this stuff, the controlling dad, the guilt-tripping mom, the friends who use him, the constant punishments for things he didn't do, doesn't just disappear. You can't absorb that much rejection, that much manipulation, that much emotional pressure as a kid and have it not come out somewhere. Every kid has a limit. Most kids hit it loudly by they break things, they run away, they yell. But Butters did something way more interesting. He invented an alter ego. I'm not a psychologist. I want to be clear about that. But you can read about this pattern pretty much anywhere. There's this thing some psychologists talk about called dissociation. When someone goes through enough emotional pressure over a long period of time, their brain starts looking for an exit. And one of the exits it finds is creating a second version of themselves. A version that gets to do all the things the real version isn't allowed to do. Strong instead of weak. Loud instead of quiet. Angry instead of grateful. Freeze instead of grounded. Professor Chaos is Butters' exit, period. It's not a costume he made for fun. It's not a phase. It's the only outlet a deeply hurt kid could come up with to finally let some of that pressure out. Look at what Professor Chaos actually does. He doesn't really hurt anyone. His evil plans are stuff like clogging public toilets with toilet paper, or moving people's lawn furniture around, or replacing the city's milk with low-fat milk. It's the most innocent supervillain plotting you've ever seen, because Butters doesn't actually want to destroy anything. He just wants to be in charge of something for once. He just wants to feel powerful for 5 minutes a day. And there's a moment in that original Professor Chaos episode where Butters monologues into his mirror about all the things that have been done to him, how his friends abandoned him, how nobody listens to him, how he's tired of being the one everyone steps on. And he says in that little Butters voice, "I'll show them all." It's played for laughs. We laughed. But when I rewatched that scene as an adult, I didn't laugh. I sat there. Because that monologue is what a kid sounds like when he's been pushed past his breaking point, and nobody in his life has noticed yet. Imagine being 9 years old, and the only way you can feel powerful, even for a second, is by putting tinfoil on your head and pretending to be someone else. Asterisk. And here's where it gets even more layered. South Park, weirdly, never lets Butters fully become Professor Chaos. Every time he tries to commit to it, the show pulls him back. He gets caught. He gets grounded. He gives up. He goes back to being sweet little Butters in the yellow shirt. Then a few seasons later, Professor Chaos shows up again, just briefly, and disappears again. It's like the show itself is saying this kid almost broke. This kid almost let it all out. But he couldn't, because the world wouldn't let him. That's the saddest part of the whole arc. Butters doesn't even get to fully be Professor Chaos. The world doesn't even let him have his villain. He's not allowed to be angry. He's not allowed to take revenge. He's just allowed to keep being Butters. Keep smiling, keep saying, "Oh, hamburgers," keep going home to get grounded for something he didn't do. The mask comes off and the cycle continues. That's what happens when someone learns very early in life, that their feelings are not allowed to take up space. So they invent an alternate self to hold all the feelings. And then even that alternate self gets shut down. Eventually, they stop trying altogether. They become the smile. They become the apology. They become the yes, sir, no, sir, because being anything else costs too much. Asterisk. Quick pause again. Hey, real talk for a second. Is there a character from another show you really want me to break down like this? Somebody from a cartoon or animated series who always seemed off to you but nobody ever really talks about? Drop their name in the comments. I'm building my next few videos based on what you guys actually want to see. I read every single comment, so tell me, who's next? Alright, now we get to the real heart of it. There's a layer to Butters that the show only barely touches on, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Butters is the only kid in South Park who actually has a real internal life. Stan deals with stuff, sure. Kyle has his moral struggles. Cartman is a chaos engine. Kenny is barely a character half the time. But Butters? Butters is the only one who actually goes home, lies in his bed, and asterisk thinks about what happened that day. He processes, he remembers, he carries things. That's why Trey Parker once said in an interview that Butters is the heart of the show, not Stan, not Kyle. Butters. Butters is the only character in South Park who feels things the way real people feel them. Everyone else is a satire of something, of liberalism, of conservatism, of pop culture, of America. Butters isn't a satire. Butters is just a kid. A real, soft, breakable kid in a town full of cartoon characters. And the show puts him through hell because that's the only way to remind us. Under all the absurdity of South Park, there are real consequences happening to real people. And Butters absorbs them all. There's an episode where Butters has to give a school's presentation about what he wants to be when he grows up. And he says very quietly that he just wants to be happy, not rich, not famous, just happy. The entire room goes silent because nobody in that town knows what to do with that answer. Butters thinks about it every day because every day he's wondering if today is the day someone's actually going to be kind to him. Imagine being 9 years old and the most ambitious dream you have for your future is the dream of just being asterisk. Okay, not great, not amazing, just okay. That's the level of damage Butters is carrying. Then there's the margarine episode. The one where Cartman dresses Butters up as a girl and sends him into another kid's house as an undercover spy. The episode is played as a comedy. But if you watch it carefully, there's a scene where Butters, as Margarine, sits at a slumber party with girls who are actually being kind to him. Genuinely kind, asking him questions, including him, telling him secrets. And Butters, who has spent his entire life starved of that kind of warmth, just sits there with the most heartbreaking smile on his face. Because for the first time, somebody is treating him like a friend. And the only reason it's happening is because they don't know he's Butters. They think he's Margarine. Once Butters is back to being Butters, the kindness disappears. The show is asking, what does it mean that this kid only feels loved when he's pretending to be someone else? That's not comedy. That's a tragedy in a yellow shirt. Asterisk, and here's the part that really sticks with me. The show never gives Butters a real ending. He never grows up and figures it out. He never moves out. He never confronts his parents. He never tells his friends to stop using him. He just keeps going, episode after episode, season after season. Cartman manipulates him again. He forgives. His dad grounds him again. He apologizes. He puts on the tinfoil helmet again. He takes off. He goes back to being Butters. He smiles. He says, "Oh, hamburgers," and we laugh. But the show has been showing us, all along, what's actually happening underneath that smile. Butters is not a comedy character. Butters is a kid caring way too much for someone his age, with no one in his life equipped to help him. And the fact that he keeps showing up, keeps trying, keeps being kind to people who don't deserve it, that's not weakness. That's the strongest thing in the entire show. Pain that doesn't break you turns into something else. And in Butters' case, that something else is one of the most quietly heroic characters in animated television history. So next time you watch an old South Park episode, watch Butters carefully. Watch his eyes when he gets grounded. Watch his face when his friends ditch him. Watch the moment right before he says, "Oh, hamburgers." That tiny pause where you can see him swallowing the entire thing. The show is telling us something the whole time. Butters wasn't the dumb kid of South Park. He was the only kid in South Park who was actually paying attention. This is partly a theory, partly a reading. Trey Parker and Matt Stone never explicitly said Butters is the most traumatized character in the show, but great shows don't have to say it. They show it year after year in 1,000 small scenes, and they trust the audience to figure it out eventually. And Butters Stotch, underneath all the tinfoil and the sweater and the apologies, is the South Park character who has carried the most pain the longest and gotten the least credit for it. So what do you think? Was Butters the real victim of South Park all along? Was Professor Chaos his only honest moment in the entire series? Tell me in the comments. Tell me which Butters episode broke you the hardest. If this video gave you something to think about, hit that subscribe button and stick around. I've got a whole list of animated characters that hid way more depth than any of us realized at the time. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and remember, sometimes the kid in the corner smiling at everything isn't naive. Sometimes he's just been carrying it alone for way too long. We just have to actually look.